Hey there, fellow explorer. Today we're taking a deep dive into Jen Sincero's You Are a Badass.
Oh, yeah.
You specifically requested this one.
Right.
So we know you're ready to unleash that inner powerhouse.
Yeah.
We've got your copy all marked up, ready to unearth those golden nuggets of wisdom.
And there's some real gems in here. What's refreshing about Sincero's approach is that she doesn't shy away from the realities of self-doubt and fear.
Right.
She tackles these universal struggles head-on, but with a disarming blend of humor and straight talk.
Absolutely. She even pokes fun at her younger self for initially dismissing these concepts.
Yeah.
It's like she's saying, hey, I was skeptical too, but trust me on this one. And that makes her message all the more relatable, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. Sincero's ability to connect with readers on such a human level is a big part of her appeal. And she dives right in exploring the power of the subconscious and how it can hold us back in ways we don't even realize.
Right. She describes it as a kind of hidden blueprint, often shaped by our childhood experiences. This really resonated with me because she shares that hilarious anecdote about the bowling alley accident.
Yes, the one where she learns to stay within the lines, literally.
Literally, yeah.
But as she reflects on that experience years later, she uncovers a deeper connection to a subconscious block around expressing her emotions freely. It's a brilliant example of how seemingly insignificant moments can have a lasting impact on our beliefs and behaviors.
It's like our brains are wired to connect those dots, even if we're not consciously aware of it. And speaking of subconscious patterns, Sincero introduces this concept of the big snooze. What exactly is the big snooze, and how does it differ from the ego?
That's a great question. While it shares similarities with the ego, the big snooze goes a bit deeper.
Okay.
It's that voice in our heads fueled by fear and self-doubt that constantly whispers reasons to play it safe and stay small. It's the master of excuses, the king of procrastination, always urging us to stay within our comfort zones, even if those zones are no longer serving us.
And she gives that example of her client who finally took a leap of faith and quit his corporate job to wait for it to open a nail salon. Not exactly a typical career move, right?
Right.
What I found fascinating was how this decision triggered what Sincero calls a detox period.
Yes. And this is where it gets really insightful.
Right.
Sincero highlights that even positive change can be met with internal resistance. It's like our old selves, those comfortable patterns, cling on for dear life, even when we're moving towards something better. In her client's case, the detox period involved facing his fear of failure, confronting his doubts about his capabilities, and essentially learning to trust himself and his unconventional path.
So how do we navigate those detox periods? How do we silence that inner big snooze and step into a more empowered version of ourselves? Sincero seems to be a big proponent of self-love.
Absolutely. She calls it a radical act and emphasizes that true self-love is not about arrogance or vanity, but about recognizing our inherent worthiness of happiness and success. It's about silencing that inner critic who tells us we're not good enough, smart enough, or deserving enough.
She makes this brilliant analogy about comparing ourselves to others being like trying to push a giant marshmallow up a hill.
Yeah.
It's exhausting, futile, and ultimately gets us nowhere.
It's such a vivid image, isn't it? And it perfectly captures the pointlessness of seeking external validation. Sincero encourages us to shift our focus inward to cultivate self-acceptance and to celebrate our unique qualities, quirks, and all.
And she provides some pretty concrete steps to get us there, right? Like affirmations, prioritizing joy, and challenging negative self-talk.
Right.
I know a lot of people who could benefit from incorporating those practices into their lives. But what about finding your calling? I'm curious to know how Sincero addresses this, because for some people it seems to be this clear aha moment, while others feel a bit lost in the woods.
That's such a common struggle, and Sincero offers a refreshing perspective. Okay.
She doesn't believe we need a singular, earth-shattering calling. She encourages us to let go of the pressure to have it all figured out and to embrace the evolution of our passions.
I love that she encourages us to pretend to be aliens observing our lives for the first time.
It's a fun and effective way to gain a fresh perspective. Sincero suggests asking ourselves, if I were an alien observing my life, what would I find fascinating? What unique skills and resources would I see that I might be taking for granted? It's about breaking free from our self-imposed limitations and approaching our lives with a sense of wonder and curiosity.
So it's less about waiting for a lightning strike of inspiration and more about actively exploring what lights us up, even if it's unconventional. This reminds me of her experience with her band, you're not going to believe this, called Crotch. Yes, you read that right, Crotch the band. It perfectly embodies Sincero's embrace of the unconventional and her belief that sometimes the most unexpected pursuits can lead to self-discovery. They weren't necessarily destined for rock stardom, but they poured their hearts into it, using music as a form of self-expression and, dare I say, self-reclamation.
Now, that's a story I want to hear more about, but first let's pause for a moment and connect this back to you, our listener.
Yeah.
How many times have you downplayed your own passions or talents because they didn't fit into a neat little box? Sincero's message is clear. Embrace your own version of crotch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about identifying what makes you feel alive, even if it's a little rough around the edges, and pursuing it with gusto.
So we've talked about the subconscious, the big snooze, self-love, and even a band called Crotch. But how does this all tie into living your best life? I have a feeling that's what you're really here for, right?
Absolutely. Sincero emphasizes the importance of being fully present, of embracing the now. She believes that clinging to youthfulness isn't about desperately trying to recapture our 20s, but about cultivating a spirit of adventure, an openness to new experiences, and a willingness to step outside our comfort zones. She recounts a time she traveled solo to India. Talk about a leap of faith.
Wow, that takes courage. I can only imagine the personal growth that comes from an experience like that.
Exactly, and she faced her fears head-on, embraced the unknown, and emerged transformed by the journey. It beautifully underscores her message that true fulfillment often lies beyond the familiar.
That's incredibly inspiring. She also delves into gratitude, giving, and forgiveness, which might seem like a bit of a departure, but I'm sensing a connection here. What do you think?
You're spot on.
Yeah.
Sincero sees these practices as essential for cultivating an abundance mindset, both internally and externally.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. How does gratitude in particular contribute to living a more badass life?
It all comes down to energy. Sincero believes that gratitude is like a magnet for attracting more good into our lives. It's about shifting our focus from what we lack to what we have, and in doing so, we raise our vibration and open ourselves up to receiving more abundance.
That makes sense. When we're constantly focused on what's missing, we're essentially sending out a frequency of lack, which in turn attracts more lack.
Right.
But when we approach life with a sense of gratitude, we're tuning into a frequency of abundance. But what about giving? Isn't that about being selfless, about putting others' needs before our own? How does that fit into this whole badass philosophy?
That's a great question. Sincero would argue that true giving comes from a place of abundance, not scarcity. It's about sharing our resources and blessings freely, knowing that the universe operates on a cycle of reciprocity.
So it's not about depleting ourselves, but about recognizing that we have an abundance to share. And in that sharing, we open ourselves up to receiving even more.
Precisely. And it's not just about material possessions, it's about sharing our time, our energy, our talents, anything that uplifts others and contributes to a greater good.
It's a beautiful way to look at it. But what about forgiveness? That can be a tough one, especially as someone has really hurt us. How does Sincero approach this often challenging topic?
Sincero emphasizes that forgiveness isn't about condoning hurtful behavior or letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing ourselves from the burden of carrying around anger, resentment, or pain.
That resonates with me. Holding on to those negative emotions can feel like lugging around heavy baggage. It weighs us down and prevents us from moving forward with a sense of lightness and freedom.
Exactly. It keeps us tethered to the past, replaying old hurts and grievances. Sincero would say that forgiveness is ultimately an act of self-care. It's about choosing to release those negative emotions for our own well-being, not necessarily for the other person.
It's like that saying, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Forgiveness is about reclaiming our power and choosing to focus on our own healing and growth. Speaking of reclaiming our power, Sincero talks about how our reactions to others can often reveal our own limiting beliefs. She even goes as far as to say that everyone we encounter is a mirror reflecting aspects of ourselves back to us. How does that work exactly?
It's a fascinating concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sincero believes that if someone's behavior consistently triggers a strong reaction in us, whether it's annoyance, anger, or judgment, it's often because it's highlighting something within ourselves that we haven't fully addressed. It could be an insecurity, a fear, or an unresolved issue from our past.
So, for example, if I find myself constantly getting frustrated by people who are chronically late, it might be a sign that I need to examine my own relationship with time, maybe even my own fears around control or efficiency.
Precisely. It's not about blaming ourselves, but about using these situations as opportunities for self-reflection and growth. Sincero encourages us to ask ourselves, what is it about this person's behavior that's triggering me? And what does that reveal about my own beliefs, values, or experiences?
It's like turning those everyday annoyances into valuable insights. It reminds me a bit of shadow work, the idea that we all have these hidden parts of ourselves that we tend to repress or deny.
Yes. And Sincero provides a really helpful exercise for uncovering those hidden stories we tell ourselves, those narratives that keep us stuck in limiting patterns. She calls them stories because they're often based on our subjective interpretations of events rather than objective truth.
And she doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
She digs even deeper into the concept of false rewards, which I found particularly insightful. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Absolutely. False rewards are those sneaky little payoffs we get for clinging to our limiting beliefs and behaviors. They're the reasons we stay stuck even when we consciously want to change. For example, someone who constantly complains about being broke might be subconsciously enjoying the attention and sympathy they receive.
So it's not that they actually enjoy being broke, but they're getting something out of it, even if it's just a temporary feeling of validation or connection.
Exactly. And these false rewards can be incredibly powerful because they often tap into deep-seated needs for love, belonging, or security. Sincero's point is that once we identify those false rewards, we can start to break free from their grip and create healthier, more fulfilling patterns in our lives.
It's like shining a light on those subconscious motivations and realizing that we have the power to choose differently. It reminds me of how we talked about silencing that big snooze earlier. But even with awareness and a willingness to change fear can be a major obstacle. Sincero doesn't shy away from that, does she?
Right.
I'm thinking specifically about that story she shares about exploring a cave. That one gave me chills.
It's a powerful story, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it perfectly illustrates how fear can paralyze us even when we're on the cusp of something incredible. Sincero describes feeling this overwhelming sense of claustrophobia and panic, a primal urge to escape the confines of the cave.
I can only imagine. I'm feeling a little claustrophobic just thinking about it. But then she has this profound realization, right?
Yes. She recognizes that the real danger wasn't the cave itself, but her own fear-based thoughts. She realizes that she has a choice to succumb to the fear and retreat back into her comfort zone, or to breathe through it, trust her instincts, and embrace the unknown.
And of course she chooses the latter, proving yet again that she's a true badass. But this applies to so much more than just physical challenges, doesn't it?
Right.
It's about those moments in life where we feel that fear rising up, whether it's starting a new business, pursuing a creative passion, or having a difficult conversation.
Absolutely. Sincero's experience in the cave becomes a powerful metaphor for facing our fears head-on and recognizing that often the greatest growth and fulfillment lie just beyond that wall of fear. And she doesn't just leave us hanging with a feel-good metaphor. She dives into practical strategies for taking action, even when fear is whispering doubts in our ears.
Right. She emphasizes the importance of making decisions quickly and decisively, using the example of Henry Ford and his relentless pursuit of the V8 engine. What I found so fascinating about that story is how Ford completely rejected the limitations presented by his engineers. They told him it was impossible to cast all 8 cylinders in one block, and his response was essentially, figure it out.
And figure it out they did.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the power of unwavering belief determination and a refusal to accept impossible as an answer.
It's like Sincero is challenging us to ask ourselves, what seemingly impossible dreams have I given up on because I accepted someone else's limitations as my own? It's a powerful question, and it leads us perfectly into our next topic, money. Now, let's be real, money is a big one for a lot of people. It's often a source of stress, anxiety, and limiting beliefs. So how does Sincero approach this often charged topic?
She dives right in with this concept of wealth consciousness, which at its core is about shifting our mindset around money. She's not advocating for greed or materialism. She's encouraging us to view money as energy, as a tool that can be used to create a more fulfilling and impactful life.
Right. She has that great line, money is currency and currency is energy. It's about recognizing that our thoughts and beliefs about money directly influence our financial reality.
Exactly. If we approach money from a place of fear or scarcity, constantly worrying about not having enough, we're actually more likely to attract those experiences.
It's like we're sending out a frequency of lack, which in turn attracts more lack. It's the law of attraction in action. So how do we shift that? How do we cultivate a healthier, more abundant relationship with money? Sincero makes a rather interesting comparison to romantic relationships.
Yes. She points out that our relationship with money is a lot like a romantic relationship. It requires nurturing respect and appreciation. If we're constantly criticizing our finances, feeling resentful towards money, or treating it with disrespect, it's no wonder our financial lives might feel like a constant struggle.
It's like we're stuck in a toxic relationship with our bank accounts. So how do we turn things around? How do we go from financial frenemies to a loving, abundant partnership with money? Sincero is a big proponent of visualization and affirmations, right?
Absolutely. She sees these practices as powerful tools for reprogramming our subconscious minds and aligning our energy with our financial goals.
So instead of focusing on what we don't have, I'm always broke, I'll never be able to afford that, we shift our language and our energy to what we want to create. Money flows to me easily and abundantly. I am worthy of financial freedom. It's about visualizing ourselves living a life of abundance and repeating affirmations that reinforce our worthiness of receiving that abundance. This is starting to feel less like a self-help book and more like a guide to hacking the universe.
In a way, that's exactly what Sincero is encouraging us to do.
Yeah.
She's reminding us that we are powerful creators of our own realities, and that includes our financial reality.
I love it. But let's get practical for a moment. We've covered a lot of ground here, the subconscious self-love, even a band called Crotch. We've talked about gratitude, forgiveness, facing our fears, and cultivating a healthier relationship with money.
Yeah.
But how do we put all of this into action? What concrete steps does Sincero suggest for integrating these principles into our daily lives?
She emphasizes the importance of moving beyond wishful thinking and taking concrete action towards our goals, no matter how big or small. She recognizes that overwhelm can be a major obstacle, so she encourages us to break down those seemingly insurmountable tasks into smaller, more manageable steps.
This is where I often get tripped up. I have a tendency to get so overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of a goal that I end up procrastinating and ultimately achieving nothing. Any advice from Sincero on how to overcome that all-too-common obstacle?
She's got you covered. She suggests approaching it like eating an elephant one bite at a time.
Okay.
Instead of trying to tackle everything at once, break it down into smaller, more digestible chunks. For example, if you want to write a book, instead of focusing on the daunting task of writing an entire book, start with a chapter, a page, or even just a paragraph.
It's about celebrating those small wins along the way, which hits to maintain momentum and motivation.
Exactly. And Sincero also stresses the importance of getting help when needed. She reminds us that we don't have to do everything ourselves, and that delegating tasks we don't enjoy or aren't good at can free up our time and energy to focus on our strengths.
It's about working smarter, not harder, and recognizing that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength and self-awareness. But even with the best laid plans and strategies in place, life happens. We encounter setbacks, challenges, and unexpected detours. How does Sincero suggest we navigate those inevitable bumps in the road?
She emphasizes the importance of surrendering to the process of trusting that the universe has our back even when things don't go according to plan. It's about releasing the need for control, embracing uncertainty, and having faith that everything is unfolding as it should.
It's about trusting the journey, even when the path ahead is unclear. It's about remembering that setbacks are not failures, but opportunities for growth, learning, and course correction. But with all this talk about surrendering and trusting the process, how do we maintain our own sense of agency? How do we balance this idea of surrender with taking action and creating the lives we want?
That's such a crucial point. It's not about passively waiting for the universe to deliver our dreams on a silver platter. It's about actively participating in the co-creation process.
So we have to do our part.
Exactly. Sincero could say it's about aligning our energy with our desires, taking inspired action, and then surrendering to the unfolding of the journey. It's about trusting that the universe has a much grander plan, even if we can't always see the bigger picture from our limited perspective.
It's about letting go of the need to micromanage every detail and trust in the process. So it's about finding that sweet spot between effort and ease, action and surrender.
Precisely. And that's where the magic really happens. It's when we release the struggle, the need to control, that we open ourselves up to receiving the abundance the universe has in store for us.
This has been such an incredibly insightful exploration of You Are a Badass. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. There's so much richness and depth to Sincero's work. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to you, our listener. If there's one key takeaway, one golden nugget of wisdom to tuck in your back pocket and carry with you, what would it be?
If I had to distill it down to one essential message, it would be to embrace your own badassery. Believe in your own inherent worthiness, your capacity for greatness, your power to create a life you love.
I love it. Short, sweet, and straight to the point. But what does that really look like in practice?
It's about silencing that inner critic that tells you you're not good enough, smart enough, or deserving enough. It's about facing your fears head on, taking bold action, and trusting that the universe has your back. It's about embracing your unique quirks and celebrating what makes you you.
It's about owning your worthiness, stepping into your power, and living a life that reflects your most authentic self.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. There's no finish line to cross, no perfect state of badassery to achieve. It's about continuously learning, growing, and expanding your capacity for creating a life that lights you up.
And speaking of creating a life that lights you up, Sincero leaves us with a final thought-provoking metaphor. She suggests we envision our lives as parties. We get to choose who and what we invite in.
What a powerful image, right?
Yeah.
It's about approaching life with intentionality, asking ourselves, who and what brings me joy? What experiences do I want to create? What energy do I want to surround myself with?
It's about curating a life that feels aligned, joyful, and authentically our own. So, dear listener, as you go out into the world armed with the wisdom of you are a badass, what kind of party will you create?
Remember, you are a badass. Now go out there and create a life that reflects that truth.
Until next time, happy diving.